Okay, in our last video, we talked about what happens when we divide a whole number by a unit fraction. We talked about the reciprocal, how 1/3 is the same as 3/1. We talked about the inverse or the opposite of division. And we used this awesome tool here to create this. So if you didn't watch the part 1, watch that first because this one will make so much more sense. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at what happens when our answer is not a whole number. So I'm just going to kind of move this piece of paper over and I'm just going to slide it down. All right, we're going to make this a little bit bigger here so that we can really see. So I'm just going to slide my camera down a little bit and make this a little bit bigger. I'm going to have some space that I can write, but I really want to use this math tool. Okay, so we're going to take a look at a fraction that if you divide it, you won't get a nice even number. So we're going to take and say 4, and we're going to divide that by 3/4. We're going to stick with fourths. Okay, so we're going to take a look at what happens when we take 4 and we divide it by 3/4. So remember, this is what I'm starting with. Start. Okay, so I'm starting with 4 wholes. And the denominator tells me my parts. Okay, so what parts do I need? So I'm going to go back over here to my number line, and I know I need 4 parts. So I'm going to make sure my number line is set up into fourths, which it is. Okay, good. So I'm starting with 4. So I'm going to make my 4 wholes, slide it down. Okay, 4 wholes, done. Now, I need to figure out how many 3/4 I can make with 4. All right, so I'm going to come down here and make another bar, but I'm going to make this one 3/4. Now, we talked about in the last class about how if you make 1, you can use that 1 to help you. So I showed the strategy of you can skip count. So I know that this is 3/4 and then another group of 3/4. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And if this is a little bit hard for you, which I don't recommend just because I feel like it's easy to mess up, you just use the duplicate tool here. You can actually make your 3/4 over and over. I think this is probably the better strategy if you're using this tool because you can physically see what's happening. All right, now watch this, guys. Remember in class today, everybody was like, whoa, hold up. Here's where 4 is. Now I'm going to draw a line. Actually, we use the little line tool here. I'm going to draw a line and I'm just going to show you that it kind of cuts right here off. So I can't really do anything here with this. So you see how that 4 is there? All right, so I'm just going to leave that line there. I know it's blocking the 4 holes, but notice that only part of that 3/4 we can use. All right, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I know that I can definitely make 5. I can make 5. So I'm going to just kind of write my thing out. I can make 5 parts that are 3/4 with 4 holes. Okay, so I can make 5 parts that are 3/4 with my holes. Okay, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But what are we going to do with this? So we know we're going to have some leftovers or remainder. Now this is where it gets a little tricky. And I'll be honest with you, even messes with my head just a little bit. So I want you to look at this. This is 3/4. So I'm going to use the pen tool and I'm just going to kind of put a box around it. All right, it's not a hole. It's actually 3/4. It's not a hole. It's 3/4. So if I take the 3/4 and divide it into 3 parts, I now have 1/3, 1/3, and 1/3 because there's 3 parts. And yes, you say, Miss Breen, it's fourths. Yes, it's fourths. But if you look at this as a whole, this 3/4. If you look at it as a whole part, you can divide this into 3 parts. 1, 2, 3. Now, how many can I fit in 4? Just this one, just 1/3. I cannot fit, and I'm going to kind of use this or use a yellow. I cannot fit this and I cannot fit that. So 2/3 of the shape is kind of cut off. I can only use 1/3. That's my remainder. So my answer is actually 5 1/3. I have 5 whole 3/4 pieces, 5 whole 3/4 pieces, and then 1/3 of the last 3/4 piece. Now let's use that strategy from yesterday. Remember we talked about the inverse and the reciprocal. So let's see if that applies. Remember, we don't change the first number because we're not changing what we're dividing by. We're not dividing, we're keeping 4. We're not changing that. So let's keep the 4, but I'm going to write it as a fraction, 4/1. I'm going to do the inverse, okay, the inverse, which is the opposite, just like when you count up to subtract. It's the same thing. If you count up, if you do 12 minus 4, or if you count up from 4 to 12, it's the same thing. We're just doing the inverse. And then I'm going to use the reciprocal. That's that other word, reciprocal. So the reciprocal of 3/4 is 4/3. They kind of work, it's just like a flip it over, okay? All right, so let's see if this works. So I'm going to use 4/3. All right, let's test the strategy. 4 times 4 is 16. 1 times 3 is 3. Let's make that a mixed number. How many 3's make a 16? 3 times 5 is 15. There's my whole number. And then what's left over? 16 minus 15 is 1. There's my 1/3. 5 1/3. Okay? So the strategy works. The strategy works. However, I will tell you, if you like making this on the map, on the number line, it's actually really fun. All right, we're going to try one more. One more. Refresh. Clear all. Let's try one more. I'm going to scroll this up. And we're going to actually change our parts. We're going to do, let's do 5. Let me think about this. Yeah, let's do 5 wholes divided by 2/3. All right, 5 wholes divided by 2/3. I'm starting with 5. Oh, I got to change my number line. Thirds. Okay, so here's my parts, 3 parts. So I have to come down here and change my number line. Fractions, thirds. Okay, and I'm starting with 5. So I'm going to make 5 wholes. 5. All right, turn that little number 1 so I can see. I have 5 wholes. That's what I'm starting with. Now I'm going to come down here and make my hopper tool again, but I'm going to make thirds, 2/3. All right, here we go. How many 2/3 can I make with 5? How many 2/3 pieces can I fit into 5? All right, I, again, love the duplicate tool. It does take some time, but I am not about rushing. If you need to see it, it's just, it makes dividing, oops, sorry, I don't want to, I hate when I do that. I always, if you're not careful, it'll shrink it and make it a different size. So just kind of slide it over carefully. All right. I know that some kids like to rush to get to the answer, but there's some beauty in this if you just appreciate it and just take it all in. All right. Here we go. I've just made my 2/3, but I'm here at 5. I am over. That's okay. I'm going to kind of use this little tool and I'm just going to kind of draw a line here right under the 5. And I'm going to just kind of slice it. Oh, look, it's in half. Look at that. That makes it a little bit easier. Let's use a red. I feel like the red shows up a little bit better. Okay, that's my last piece. Doesn't quite make it. Yes, it's a 2/3 piece, but if I cut the 2/3 into 2 parts, I have a half and another half, but I'm not using this half. I'm not using this because it's over 5. I want this one. All right, so how many holes? 1 2/3. How many whole 2/3? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so I can make 7 2/3. 7 groups of 2/3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then my leftovers. It's not a third. It's not 2/3. it's actually a half, because if I take that 2/3 and I figure out where it left, where it's cut off, I split it into 2 parts, it's a half. I'm going to use half of it in my 5. So 7.5. Now let's use the strategy, the multiplying strategy, and to see if it works. Okay, I'm starting with my whole, so I don't want to change what I'm starting with. You don't change what you're starting with. We're keeping that 5. We're going to do the inverse, the opposite of divide, which is multiply. We're going to use the reciprocal of 2/3, which is 3/2. Now let's multiply and see what we get. 5 times 3, 15. 1 times 2 is 2. Simplify. How many 2's make a 15? Well, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. I can make 7 wholes. 2 times 7 is 14. I have 15. 15 minus 14 is 1. That's my leftover out of 2. It matches. The strategy works, okay? But don't be afraid to use this number line. Okay, in the next video, we'll take a look at what happens when we do fraction by fraction. Okay, fraction by fraction.